Part 1, Chapter 2, The Crisis in Heaven.
And the angels who did not keep their original inheritance, but left their own dwelling place. Jude 1:6.
The first to decide to live independently of God was Lucifer, a cherub who held the highest position in heaven after the Son of God.
You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings, that they might gaze at you. Ezekiel 28:14, 15, 17.
This angel of the highest station was in the very presence of God and His Son. He had the sacred role of shedding the light of the knowledge of God's character, glory, upon all other angels. But his beauty, abilities, and glory led him to a proud self-forgetfulness, for he began to take credit for all that God had given him. The next step was that he did not want to worship a being who had received everything from God. But when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says,
Let all the angels of God worship him. Hebrews 1:6.
The shining cherub began to envy the Son of God and to wonder why everyone could not worship him. He wished to be in the place of Christ, that is, the one who is like the Most High.
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Isaiah 14:12-14, NKJV.
The mount of the congregation was the place where God and His Son held their councils for the welfare of all in the universe. Lucifer's distorted view led him to envy the only begotten Son of God, the full participant in His counsels, and the one through whom he was created. In rejecting the order established by the Creator, Lucifer rejected the very wisdom of God, which decreed the welfare of the universe. The story of Haman and Mordecai, an illustration of rebellion. The dynamics of these dramatic events are illustrated in the book of Esther through the story of a Jewish captive named Mordecai, who was living in the courts of the Persian king Ahasuerus Xerxes. The king's right-hand man was an ambitious and proud man named Haman. He walked the streets and wanted everyone to bow down to him, but Mordecai would not worship anyone except the God of heaven. This enraged Haman, and he plotted to issue a death decree to destroy Mordecai and all his people. Later, one night, when the king could not sleep, he ordered that the royal archives be read to him. There was recorded the case of Mordecai, who had exposed the plot of two men who wanted to kill the king. Ahasuerus asked his servants what reward had been given to Mordecai for his good deed, and it became clear that he had not been rewarded. The king called for his advisor Haman, and from here on, the rest of the story unfolds.
And Haman came in, and the king said to him, What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, Whom would the king delight to honor more than me? So Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits within the king's gate. Omit nothing of all that you have spoken. Esther 6:6-10.
Thus he who sought worship did not receive it, but he who did not seek worship was exalted and praised. Haman's murderous hatred illustrates what had been brewing in Lucifer's heart against the meek Son of God. Hence it is said of him that he was a murderer from the beginning, John 8:44. But he would not reveal his feelings directly, but began in an insidious way to slander the character of God and His Son. At first he said nothing bad about them, but he suggested improvements in the government and laws of heaven. This is also illustrated in the story of one of King David's sons, Absalom. His name means father of peace, but he turned against his father and acted subversively against his government.
After this, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses, and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was, whenever anyone had a lawsuit which was to come before the king for judgment, that Absalom would call to him and say, "What city are you from?" And they would say, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe in Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you." Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice." And so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. In this manner, Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. 2 Samuel 15, 1-6.
In a similar way, Lucifer stole the hearts of the angels by presenting God as someone who did not have their best interests at heart. Gradually, he succeeded in implanting a new idea of justice in the minds of the angels.
"I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, the angels." Isaiah 14:13. "Shall the throne of iniquity, which devises evil by law, have fellowship with you?" Psalm 94:20.
Since, according to Lucifer, angels had no need for law, transgression of God's law naturally had no negative consequences. Satan's theory of justice led to the conclusion that every sin must be punished, and God could not annul the punishment and still be just.
"For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it killed me. Therefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy and just and good. Has then what is good become death to me? Certainly not. But sin, that it might appear sin, was producing death in me through what is good, so that sin through the commandment might become exceedingly sinful." Romans 7:11-13.
The sinful thinking that Lucifer proposed led to the conclusion that every sin must receive its punishment, and God cannot forgive sin and at the same time remain just. On the other hand, by instilling in the angels his new philosophy, according to which beings had their own value and life independent of God, he implied that they had no need for law, because as higher beings, they could determine for themselves what was right and what was wrong.
"You have defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading." Ezekiel 28:18.
Lucifer's trading was made possible by his lie that he and the rest of creation possessed all their gifts of themselves. If you possess something, you can trade it. There was great confusion and commotion in heaven. Some of the angels went to tell God of the alarming situation. They found him conferring with his Son in the unapproachable light of his glory. 1 Timothy 6:15-16. The angels were warned of the disastrous consequences of Lucifer's chosen course, and moved by concern, they went to try to dissuade their friends. The Son of God also tried to dissuade Lucifer with tenderness and inexpressible love, showing him the justice and wisdom of God's decisions. Although Lucifer did not at first fully understand where his path was leading, God's warning measures fully revealed to him the danger in which he was. Nevertheless, after some hesitation, he still chose to pursue his independent and rebellious course. He chose this in the light of the full revelation of the true, good, merciful, and loving character of God. Henceforth, therefore, nothing more could be done for him. We hear an echo of God's sorrow for his backsliding son in the words of David when he learned of his son's death.
"Then the king was deeply moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said thus, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." 2 Kings 18:33.
Lucifer, having harnessed all the powers of his mighty intellect, waged this heavenly war of ideas to draw as many followers as possible into his empire. Thus he reached out to the very heritage of Christ, which the Scriptures symbolically represent as his bride, who is at the same time in travail for him.
Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Revelation 12:1-4.
The former light-bearer now used his insidious lies about God's character, symbolized here by the dragon's tail, Isaiah 9:15b, to deceive 1/3 of the angels. He thus deprived both himself and them of their eternal inheritance.
And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Jude 1:6.
These angels numbered more than 1/3, but Satan, as his new name is, failed to deceive all into believing that if they returned to God and his Son, they would not forgive them and accept them. For this reason, some of his followers returned to their Creator, who, like the father of the prodigal son, forgave them and welcomed them with joy. Luke 15:11-32. God could have stopped Lucifer's rebellion by using force against him, but that would have been in complete contradiction to his non-violent nature. Moreover, it was decided for the good of the entire universe that Lucifer would be allowed to develop his ideas to the fullest extent, so that all could see how bitter their fruit was. Daniel's vision, another heavenly illustration. In the book of Daniel, there is another illustration of the crisis in heaven, although the primary meaning of the symbols in it refers to earthly powers that Satan used. The ram symbolizes the kingdom of Christ and his Father, where the former is represented by the larger horn that grew up later, and the latter is represented by the smaller horn whose glory, character, was magnified by his Son. Daniel 8:3, Philippians 2:9-11. The goat represents Satan's kingdom, and its king is identified by his great horn. Daniel 8:5. Since Satan stood up because of his beauty, and thus initiated a value system based on achievement, as opposed to one based on inheritance, he would no longer worship Christ, who had received everything from his Father. Thus the goat succeeded in breaking the 2 horns of the ram and in corrupting the divine pattern of their relationship in the minds of the angels. But Lucifer was broken when the Father gathered all the heavenly host and clearly revealed the relationship he had with his Son. Daniel 8:8. After this defeat, Lucifer recovered and spread 4 other lies horns that gave him authority among the 4 winds of heaven. Daniel 8:8b. These are the main lies by which he rules over the inhabitants of the earth. But the lie by which Satan succeeded in sweeping away 1/3 of the angels, stars, in heaven was the lie about the character of the Father. Daniel 8:10. Satan envied Christ for his part in the plans for the coming creation of the earth and its inhabitants. How pleased he would be if he could win this new creation to his side.
So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Revelation 12:8-9.
Now that the enemy has descended to earth with his army, God and his Son hope that the representatives of the new creation will make the right choice to remain forever within the boundaries of their happy world.